Chapter 11. Zombie Encounter. Adam and Lake had walked through what was left of the night. Approximately 2 hours after their daring escape, they finally reached the Effingham train station. A tall, decorative clock at the street corner in front of the station was just about to strike 5 o'clock. They had walked mostly in silence, but somewhere in the night, the pair concluded that people would be looking for them, so they could not go back to their house. It was decided that their only option was to find their grandmother. They didn't have her phone number, but they did have her address on the birthday card envelope in Lake's pocket, along with $200 in travel money. They entered the building and collapsed on one of the benches to rest. Adam took in their surroundings. The train station was a small one. It was a red brick building with a green roof and white trim around the windows. There were 4 or 5 long wooden benches inside. Adam noticed that the place had not yet been cleaned for the day. There was garbage all over. The floors were littered with napkins, papers, and other discarded items. The 2 trash bins near the doors on either end of the narrow building were overflowing. Next to the bin nearest the siblings, there was an open, empty pizza box with hardened cheese and uneaten crusts in it, along with 6 empty beer bottles standing neatly in a row on top of it. Then, a man came walking into the room from a hallway. Adam looked up to see a sign hanging from the ceiling, just above him that read, "Restrooms." He was dressed in gray coveralls and carrying a broom in one hand and a dustpan on the end of a long stick in the other. Immediately, the man donning a name tag, Bill, started sweeping. Adam saw 4 travelers shuffling into the station, all in a row, and 2 more already sitting down. None of them seemed to notice the children, as they never even raised their heads to look around. Adam thought they looked and acted more like mindless zombies than real living people. The thought of it caused Adam to shudder and scoot a little closer to Lake. Adam grabbed an Amtrak map and train schedule and began perusing. After a few minutes, Adam looked up from the schedule, and as he did, he caught the eye of the old man, sitting behind the glass of the ticket window. Adam noticed the man staring at the 2 kids. Quickly looking away, Adam suddenly understood that Lake and he stuck out like 2 sore thumbs. It dawned on Adam that the man behind the ticket window would not sell 2 children train tickets to North Dakota without an adult. And he knew that the longer they stayed there, the more and more likely it would be that someone, maybe one of the handfuls of zombie commuters or the ticket man himself, would get suspicious and ask questions or call the police. Without looking at the man again, Adam grabbed Lake's hand, and they walked towards the exit. Between the children and the door stood Bill the janitor. As they walked, Adam stared at the man. Then the broom in his hand dropped to the floor, causing a loud crash echoing through the long building. The man let out a low guttural groan or growl. When Adam looked from the broom lying on the floor back up to the man's face, he let out a gasp. Adam squeezed Lake's hand even tighter and ran out of the station, brushing past the janitor, almost knocking him over. They continued running across the street to a small donut shop, the only business that looked open. At first, Lake gave a quiet protest, not wanting to leave the station, but then followed her brother. Once entering the shop, they sat in one of the booths next to a window facing the train station. Adam was breathing heavier than he should have been for just running the short distance, and he would not take his eyes off the door of the station across the street. Lake asked, "What's wrong with you?" Adam ignored the question, so Lake asked again, "Adam, what's wrong?" Adam mumbled, "Nothing." Lake didn't believe him and knew from the way he was acting that he was scared. "I'm going to ask you again, what's the matter?" Adam turned and looked at his sister, considering whether to say anything. Then he asked, "Did you notice the janitor?" Lake shot her brother a confused look, but answered, "Yes." "Was there something off about him?" "What are you talking about, Adam? You're scaring me." Adam took a deep breath and convinced himself that it was nothing. He said, "I just need some sleep because I swear the janitor looked deformed, as if his skin was falling off his face. Lake, he looked just like a zombie." Lake gasped, but then smiled at her brother, conveying to him that she didn't believe him. She said, "Yeah, right," and laughed. Adam forced a smile and chuckled. "Just kidding. I almost had you." Lake shook her head. She said, "That's not funny." Adam just kept smiling. But Adam really wasn't kidding. He thought, "I must be crazy. Maybe I'm just really tired and scared. My mind is playing tricks on me." Then Adam regrouped and said, "Let's just relax here and plan our next move." Throughout the night, Lake was upset. She quietly cried as they walked, but this morning she seemed to be in better spirits. She knew that her parents were in bad shape, and they were desperately in need of help. But at her core, Lake was an adventurous girl. The situation was scary, but an adventure just the same. Adam, on the other hand, fought to constantly remind himself to keep going for his little sister's sake. Otherwise, he knew his fear would completely consume him, and he would become paralyzed with it. Keeping Lake safe was now his sole purpose, and the fuel that kept him going. He refused to think of himself. Instead, he just focused on Lake and continued to rack his brain in an attempt to find a way out of this nightmare. He, of course, desperately hoped they would eventually get back to his parents, but he knew that might require a long journey, whether figuratively or literally, and he had to concentrate on the here and now if they had any chance of navigating it successfully. Adam had made a very risky decision to run away with his 7-year-old sister, and the realization hit him like a ton of bricks that if they had any chance of making it, he would need to keep it together. They each ordered a donut, and Adam handed the young cashier a $100 bill. The teenager was suspiciously looking at the two of them while making the change. After the young man handed Adam $98.32 in change, the children sat down to figure out what they were going to do. They were just quietly eating their donuts for the next 10 minutes until Adam suddenly smiled. He looked at Lake as if he figured it all out. Adam turned to the counter, asking the teenage cashier if he could use their phone. The skinny kid looked at the two of them, sitting there, and gave sort of half-shrug, as if he couldn't have cared less, but was still annoyed at the same time. Without saying a word, he motioned Adam to the back room. Adam told Lake to sit tight and wait for him. When Adam got to the back, he asked the kid for some privacy. The worker mumbled, "Yeah, whatever, dude. Just hurry it up already." Adam nodded, pushed 0, and waited. He heard a female's voice. "Operator," he asked the woman. Yeah, can I have the phone number listed for 444 Angels Road, Mountain, North Dakota? First name, Norin?" There was a long pause on the other end. Then a voice said, "That person is not listed." Before Adam could respond or ask another question, he heard a dial tone. The voice on the other end was gone, and so was Adam's smile. Adam slowly hung up the phone. He thought about calling again, but realized he didn't know what else he could ask. He returned to the table. Adam was frustrated and exhausted. He sat down, crossed his arms on the surface, and without saying a word, laid his head down on top of them. Lake watched as Adam surrendered to his exhaustion and almost immediately drifted off to sleep. Lake looked around, adjusted a little in her seat to get comfortable, and then closed her eyes. Lake opened her eyes to find herself back in the empty hospital. She began to walk down the dark halls. She saw one room off in the distance, glowing with light. Lake was drawn to the light of the room, like a moth to a flame. Lake thought that there was something about the otherworldly brightness that screamed hope in the bleak setting. Lake peeked into the room and saw a teenager lying in the hospital bed. Lake froze. She realized the room belonged to the girl who was attacked by the bear. With caution, Lake edged closer. It was hard to see the girl through the bandages that covered much of her face. Lake was very curious and felt compelled to lift the gauze dressings. She wanted to see the wounds the creature left behind. Slowly, she moved in with great deliberation until she was right next to the bed and finally close enough to reach out her hand towards the girl's face. Just as she was about to pull back the bandages, the girl's eye, the one that wasn't covered in cloth, sprang to life. Sending Lake stumbling backward, the girl jolted upright, screaming, "Find her!" Back in the donut shop, Lake opened her eyes and looked around. Lake, now breathing heavily, noticed Adam was still sleeping. Lake knew she was too exhausted to stay awake. So, with some apprehension, Lake once again closed her eyes and drifted away.